Welcome to our show. My name is Jonathan Tripp. I'm so glad to see everybody here today. Today we're going to be talking about the art of standing out. And I know for me, this is going to be a really great time. This is my friend Art Jones. Art, I got to say thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be on our show. I know you're a couple hours back. So this is a little bit for me this is like 10 o'clock in the morning because we do the show Monday through Friday still at 10 a.m. But you're a couple hours back, right?
It's 7:06 right
Yeah,
now.
it's like 7 o'clock in the morning, but that's okay because you're a really early riser.
Well,
Um,
I live in Tucson, Arizona, and we're headed to a weekend that might be 110 degrees on Saturday. So it's hot. And so if you
yeah.
don't get up early and get out and do your outdoor thing before 10
Mm-hmm.
a.m., you're just going to be burning up. So I'm in the pool by about 5:30. So this is mid morning for me already.
Gotcha. Yeah, that I know what you're saying. It because it really does get hot. I used to actually live out in the greater Phoenix area, out in Gilbert Mesa area,
Oh
and
yeah.
I always seemed like whenever I had something to do, it was always 110, 120 degrees outside. So it kind of got ridiculous for that.
Yeah.
But that was always that was it was I'm the desert has its own beauty. That's the
You,
best way I could say it.
You want to know how I cool off when it gets hot out here?
Okay.
When it gets hot and it's 105 in Tucson, which it happens on occasion, but it's not consistent. We're always in triple digits, but 105, 107 is hot. I
Yeah.
will ask Google, what temperature is it in Phoenix? And typically it's 10 degrees hotter. So because we're a little higher in elevation, we don't get quite as hot as Phoenix. So that
Yeah.
always cools me off, and I know that somebody else is burning up when I'm burning up, they're even burning up even more.
It really does get actually very hot, and I know there's always the different kinds of jokes and things like that.
The
That
dry
always
heat
we always
and
make, right? Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
I'm going to July I'm going to New York in July to trade hot here for hot and humid in New York because I'm from New Jersey and I prefer the humidity that over the searing heat of the desert.
mhm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, how about this? Let's get started because I had asked you if you would be a guest on the show, and we kind of just talk back and forth. What are some of the different things we could talk about? Because you're pretty versatile with just your experience and just the different people you talk to. It's and I really mean that in a I'd really love just to be able to ask you, just in some
Okay.
general sense, and I know today's topic, the title for today is the art of standing out, and I think some people thought this was kind of a play off of your name. Like yesterday's show was a play off of our. I didn't actually mean it this way. This is the title you suggested, but I had wanted to. I wanted to bring this up and ask you, what is it? Let's talk about this. What is the art of standing out, especially in this day and age, especially with these technologies that we have, from where we've come from and where we're going, both in like whether it's advertisement or personal branding and those sorts of things. So I'd really like to get a lot of your perspectives, a lot of your questions, and that's also a cue to our audience. If they would like to ask some questions, please feel free, drop them in the chat wherever you are, wherever you're watching this. Please drop it in the chat. I would love to be able to bring these questions up for Art. But Art, would you just real quick? I forgot. Would you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay. My name is Art Jones. I'm the principal consultant here at the Art of Standing Out. I've been in private practice for about 8 years. Prior to that, I was on the sales side of large technology sales to Fortune 500, Forbes 2000 size companies for a long time, 30 plus years. So I'm a technologist. So it was an easy transition to come over to the social media platforms and become a social media architect. I'm helping people do marketing about 8 years ago because I've been on the internet since the 80s. The interesting thing about the art of inbound marketing was my first incarnation, right, as a brand when I was in private practice. And The art of inbound marketing was all about creating great content in the proper context. And in order to create great content in the proper context, you had to know who your ideal prospect was, right? And I discovered a lot of people really didn't either want to take the time or they didn't want to do the work to define their ideal prospect. And I thought it was important, so I took a deep dive into what does it mean to understand your ideal prospect? What kind of work do you really have to do? Which led me from marketing to brand strategy. And the brand strategy led me to storytelling as a way to liberate these stories about who these ideal prospects were. And as a longtime salesperson, I discovered doing those three things well: understanding your brand, telling compelling and insightful and thoughtful stories to your ideal prospects would help you market better and sell more. So inbound marketing is the genesis, and I guess where I am today is inbound selling, because we're using great content in the right context, pointing it at the right audience to call people to action and grow businesses. And the art of standing out, Jonathan, and all of that is the biggest discovery in all of my years of doing this kind of work is that the hardest thing for people to do is to accept ownership of their own ideas and what they believe. It's easy for us to pick up a book by Chris Brogan or Gary Vee and read it and then recite what they say. But then we're just a parrot. And if I want to get Gary Vee, I'll go to Gary Vee. I'll find him on Creative Live. But if I want to get you, I need to get what you believe. And people have a hard time standing up for what they believe. They have a hard time taking ownership of it. And I find that that hurdle, once you get over it, it changes the trajectory of people's thinking about their business and the trajectory of the business itself.
That's really interesting. You know, like you said, you know, it's being able to stand up for yourself in what you believe in. And I think oftentimes we mistake that as being, in order to be able to do that, I have to be offensive. I have to be in your face. Is that always the case, though? That I have to kind of be right in your face, and in order to be able to say, look, I mean, I have certain beliefs, or I believe that certain things work together in a certain way, whether it's sales or maybe like a personal issue or something. Does it mean that I always have to be abrasive in my approach to it in order to be able to stand up for what I believe?
No, I think it's the polar opposite of being abrasive. I mean, I use the analogy, being abrasive would be analogous to outbound marketing. Imagine a networking event of 100 people and you walk into the ballroom at the hotel. You're going to go networking and you're there for a few minutes. You're having a good time. You may have some hors d'oeuvres and a cocktail in your hand. And then all of a sudden there's a guy or a gal on the other side of the room that stands on the table and starts saying, you know, hey, over here, I'm the greatest, because that's outbound marketing. You're going to interrupt everybody to tell them how great you are and hope somebody's listening. When you stand up for your ideas, you could be in the corner of the room talking to two people, but if what you're saying resonates, you know, the old Simon Sinek, if you believe what I believe, right? If you believe, my why has me believing these things, and if you believe what I believe, it will draw a community of people around you. And then you'll find people migrating to your corner of the room that believe what you believe, but you first have to stand up for what you believe in order to draw that crowd.
So I do understand how important it is to be able to say, look, you know, this is who I am, and these are the things that I like or that I believe or that I support, and being clear about it. But then that's just me. That's just me in my corner of the room. How do I then go from the kind of that introspective side of knowing what your product or what your service is? How do I go from the inside to the outside? I think that's I mean, I know I struggle. I've struggled with a lot of like getting to know myself and getting to know, well, hey, what are the things that I really like, or maybe in some cases, what are the things I really don't like? But how do I go from that introspective to the, reaching out and touching the world and the people around me and the community and such?
8 years ago, I would have said, let's start marketing. But what I discovered, my marketing 6 years ago, had evolved to requiring a business plan, because I realized if somebody had a business plan, in the plan it said I wanted to grow 18% this year, and if you want to grow 18%, then we need to market to meet that standard. If you don't have a business plan, you can't tell me what your goals are, really, in a succinct way. Mm-hmm. But in looking at business plans, I realized that people didn't articulate why they founded the business, what was broken in the world that they founded the business to go fix, all of those kinds of things. And that's what led me to storytelling. So the answer to your question is, I believe that when we get our own narrative right, it's like the computers that we're all sitting in front of right now. There's an operating system and then there's programming that allows that computer to do what it does. And stories are like the programming that operate us. When we have a narrative about ourselves, about why we do what we do, who we do it for, how they're changed after they get it, if we even take the time to think about that, then that becomes the narrative that operates us. And then we can tell the story about that mission. Mm-hmm. But if you don't take the time to get your own operating system loaded with the right programming, to know what your narrative is, and that's your origin story, right? So I founded a business. So tell me the story of why you founded this business. Mm-hmm. And the origin story is, when I was 6 years old, that I knew that I had an inquiring mind, and I've always had that, and there's evidence every 5 years that I can tell a story about that sense of inquiry. And that sense of inquiry is what is the origins that helped me found the business, because I had this critical skill that made this business make sense so I could fix what was broken that I'd identified in the world. And so there's several stories. There's the origin story. What's your superpower, right? What makes you remarkable? What's your purple cow? We all have it.
Right. What's
your founding story? I founded this business because. Mm-hmm. What's your product story? I founded this business to build this product to fix what was broken in those people's lives or in those businesses. And then the customer story. My customer is a man or a woman of this age, making this much money, working in these industries and having these challenges. Or a business that blah, blah, blah. And there's perhaps an evolution story. When I founded this business, I discovered that. But over the years and working this way, I evolved to add these things into the business to help serve my marketplace better. Mm-hmm. And, data tells and stories sell. And there are great, we've known since the beginning of time that story is powerful. That's just how we humans operate. Mm-hmm. We've told stories. We now know through neuroscience that story truly calls us to action because it changes our blood chemistry. A sad story will elicit cortisol into our bloodstream, a hormone, right? A story of empathy will elicit oxytocin to be emitted into our bloodstream. And the neuroscientists have told those kinds of stories, taking blood before they told the story, taking more blood, and then after taking the second blood draw and looking at the hormones that were elicited, they could predict who was going to donate money to a nonprofit for children going out the door. If that's true, it's not just the stories we use to call our audience to action, because those stories have the compelling power to change the biology of the people we talk to. Okay. But if we're not telling the same kinds of powerful stories to ourselves and getting them right, we're missing a huge opportunity.
And I think it's really interesting how you bring up, the data, what the data tells, the story sells, and because I've been really interested lately in understanding where my where my audience is, where potential clients are, who's visiting what site, and paying attention to a lot of numbers. And I think while that there's some importance in that, I think, and that we've always talked about this, at least on this show, where if you get so caught up in the numbers, you end up just having like a paralysis, where it's you letting the numbers, the reflective numbers, dictate what you're going to do in the future. And I think it's okay. There's a balance to it, and just like in the storytelling, it's not always about the buildup. It's not always about your backstory. It's about what you're doing now and what you're going to do. I mean, there's different elements to the story, and if you took out one element to the story, the whole story just kind of feels flat. You're not telling the actual story, so I think it takes a lot to put together to make that, to make your story interesting, to make it compelling, to make people to maybe want to come back and learn more about you, work with you, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts on that?
I think because that's kind of heading toward the notion that there's a formula, and there's a formula, but in our humanness, we know how to tell a story. The challenge for most, or let me say it differently, the opportunity for most is to simply liberate the stories that we all have to tell. And there's the overused term that we should all be our authentic selves. I think it's an overused term, and I would rather say let's just be honest with each other, right? And authenticity, being who I really am. The art of standing out is about me being more me. It's me embracing me and giving myself a big hug and saying, "You've got good stuff. Just share it with the world," right? Be more you, because like a snowflake, there's only one me. But if I behave like Jonathan Tripp, then I become a clone of you. Like I could put a black turtleneck on, have black jeans and sneakers, and I could do my best Steve Jobs impression. I'll never be Steve Jobs, right? People might appreciate that. So, wow, that's a pretty cool guy, turtleneck, black jeans. But when they get it, they say, well, wait a second. I think he's trying to be Steve Jobs. Steve's gone. Who is he really?
Yeah.
Right. And that's where the authenticity gets stuck. When we don't feel empowered to be who we really are. We don't feel that our ideas have value. And when we stand up for our own ideas is when we stand out from the crowd, just like a snowflake or a fingerprint.
That's a really great point you bring out. And Jenny in the chat, she actually brings up a question. I wanted to bring it up, and I'm glad we're kind of still talking about this. She says, and I'll just read it for those of you guys that are watching this on the replay. It's like, it is scary to hold unpopular ideas. But what is your advice to those of us who believe in ideas that most other people in our field disagree with?
You have to be prepared to embrace the slings and arrows that come your way. If you really genuinely are committed to what you believe, because you know what you believe, when given to your ideal prospect, will change their world, change their business, then for me, I talk a lot about storytelling and brand and marketing and sales, but at the end of the day, it's about leadership. When you accept a mantle of responsibility for your ideas, you become a leader. And that's like putting 4 stars on your shoulder or whatever emblem you want to use, and you have to lead with those ideas. And when you lead, there will be people that disagree with you. But that's what thought leaders do. They plow forward because they know that the value of their ideas will change the trajectory of businesses and people. So they do that. And think about 2,500 years ago when Plato and Socrates and Aristotle stood on the steps in Greece. They got into those debates because they were hashing out the ideas and they were prepared to debate, to defend their ideas. And we should each take that as a page from those thought leaders' books from 2,500 years ago and embrace it as our strategy, because when we stand up for what we believe is when we stand out. And think about all of the platforms. I know in the green room you said we're on YouTube Live, we're on Facebook Live, we're on Blab, and we're on Whoza or Huzza. 4 platforms. There could be thousands of eyeballs watching this now live or on replay. And how many other people are broadcasting at this very moment somewhere in the world, sharing their ideas? If your ideas sound like everybody else's ideas, then you're trading in no like and trust, and that's fine, right? I think that people make decisions, and especially when you want to go big and you want to have a trajectory like this, then you're really asking people to separate themselves from more money. It's not $100 or $1,000; it's $10,000 to do business with me, right? And you have to think deeply about that. And no like and trust, is that enough? Knowing and liking is important. Trust, I think, is based on the credibility and authority that we bring to the table. And if we're not standing up for ideas, we have no collateral. We don't have that. We can be known, we can be liked, but trust, I think, stands tall on the solid foundation of credibility and the authority for what you bring to the party. And if I'm saying what Gary Vee says, that's not authority. And it's like eating. This morning I had a fruit salad for breakfast, right? I am but I've taken that fruit and now it's metabolizing. It's becoming me. Read Gary Vee, make it your own, right? Listen to Jonathan talk about Pinterest or whatever platform, but make it your own. Digest it like you digest your food, and incorporate it into who you are and what you believe about what you hear. And then you will stand out like that snowflake. There's only one fingerprint like this. If my fingerprint is unique and I say somebody else's ideas, I'm being not faithful to who I am.
Right.
And that's the struggle we all have. That's the opportunity we all have to stand up for ourselves and what we believe. And it's not just standing up, because we have to do the work. That's what leadership is. We have to commit to do the work on our ideas, to have ideas that have value. And then we have to believe in them. And then we have to be committed to sharing them on all the live stream platforms, writing the book and standing at the podium, and on and on and on.
Right. So that really is taking that internal aspect.
Yeah.
It's taking the internal, where, you've gone through a little bit of the struggle. There's a struggle. Let's be honest. There's a hard work, grind it out, figuring out what you do and what you don't want to do. Getting from that place, because I think early on, it's very easy, just, it's a lot of intake. It's a lot of, you're reading a lot of books. You're trying some of these things out, figuring out what's you, what's not you in the process. Maybe, you're somewhere in your business or in your, in your life where you say, look, this isn't working out. I want to do something different. And you're in that pivot process, you're in that change process. So, we've talked about like this internal struggle. And like I said, I think a lot of people, and I'll put myself into that, it's getting from what I just think on the inside, making sure that I express it out. And I happen to use live stream. I happen to use live stream video to be able to do that. It's not a secret. It's not I'm trying to just create a podcast that I never produce. No, I it's taking the time to actually do it, but it's having some opinions about it. But how do we get from that internal to the external side?
I think for me, it's the use of story, because it's that's a thought-provoking question. And how do we get from the internal to the external? If your question is how do I coalesce all my ideas and productize them so I can then bring them to a market that I serve? Is that a good summary of the question?
Yeah. Yeah.
If that's true, then you have to. Let me say it this way. If we were having this conversation 6 years ago, I would have said, well, look, I do social media. What do you got? Okay, let's promote it. Let's just do it. Right? Because that can get the job done. Yeah. I've got a sales funnel. Let's promote it. Let's start tweeting. Let's get it out there. my ideal prospect says, okay, but isn't there more? And I said, yeah, there is a lot more. Um, if you, and it comes down to, if 8 years ago, 6 years ago, you would have said, I want to grow my business. So, okay, let's use these social platforms, and we've got these tactics, these tools that we can use. Let's just blow it up, and you'll make money. My ideal prospect wants to make meaning. That's important. My ideal prospect wants to make meaning, and in order to make meaning, they know that it's about, and they've read the Simon Sinek book, right? They know that this notion that people don't buy what I do or how I do it, they buy why I do it, right? And they read the Seth Godin book that says, each of us has something that makes us remarkable. And then they read the other Seth Godin book that says, we're humans, and as humans, we historically have been tribal, and each of us has a responsibility to lead our tribe, right? So you take all that together, and there's other books out there, right? That Dov Seidman challenges Simon Sinek and says, it's not just why, Simon. It's how you do anything means everything. That was Dov's book, right? And then there's this notion that who you do it for matters, because there's plenty of people that want to use social media to just reach the world and hope that it's like throwing spaghetti, taking it out of the pot, throwing it up against the wall and hoping something sticks, right? And all of those strategies work, and you can make money. But when you make meaning, when you want to make meaning, that's who I serve, because they want to begin with being with their mission and their heartfelt intention being in alignment with the market that they serve, right? So, the art of standing out, when I changed it into an acronym, it becomes TAO, SO. And the TAO part is the Tao. That's the Chinese philosophy. I just lucked out with that being in the name, because that really is the foundationally what I believe, that if we don't bring ourselves in alignment and harmony with the audience that we serve, then it's going to be tougher for us to make meaning. Sure. I think I went around the question you asked, but
I think one of the biggest challenges that we're facing now is that, like you said, if I asked you this question 8 years ago, you would have said, "Oh, this is great. I have a business plan, or I have a marketing plan. We'll customize it to your exact needs." But it's basically turning on the marketing funnel. Right, it's taking what you have and let's just sell it to people. But now you've kind of changed a little bit of your focus. Well, not a little bit. You have changed your focus to saying, look, it's not about necessarily making profit. That's not a bad thing, but it's about making the meaning. And in the making the meaning aspect of it, what I'm seeing now is that it is the end goal is just as important as the journey that it takes to get there. And that is something that not a lot of people understand. Not as many people value. I think once they're going through it, they actually value it more. But again, when it comes down to, okay, so how do I really connect with an audience? And I don't mean to use such generic terms. I apologize to everybody that kind of sees it that way. I don't mean to use it, but like Melissa says here in the comments, she says, yes, but how do I market and profit from my beliefs and products? Because I know for her, it's not a compromise. It's not like, well, I have to change out who I am and the things that I do. It's how do I connect those really core key aspects with our potential audience? How do I stand out from what seems like everybody else that wants to do the same thing that we're doing?
I think that we have to do the work to stand up for what we believe. But and that's the banner that hangs over, right? The work, but the work, I believe, begins with each of us. And there's the 5 stories, and there's 1,500 stories. But when you start liberating your stories, right? When you think about the founding story, I founded this business because I wanted to be, because I knew I had skills. And maybe my skill is that I'm a good executive and I'm a good manager. I build great teams and I know how to find the right people to build this thing that will fix that thing that's broken in the world. In that couple of sentences, I've talked about my skill right? I've talked about something I've identified that's broken in the world. That's my mission. That's my making meaning. It's broken. I'm going to fix it. And I'm going to take all of my effort and all of my energy and point it at that thing. And I believe the stories that if we can tell the stories, right? Because in that thing that's broken in the world, there's people in those businesses, or there's people in general, because maybe I'm a consultant and I work with people. Maybe I'm a builder of widgets and I work with these companies. If I can't tell my customer's story, and the customer story it's analogous to if you drew a happy face in the middle of a page, and and that was a happy face, and that's your ideal prospect, right? You should be able to draw on the arcs around that happy face, what they think and feel, what they say and do, what their pain is, what their gain is, where they're hanging out now, trying to find those answers. If you don't know those answers, do the work to find those answers. Because in doing that, you have done, that's market research. But it's more than market research. When you know that ideal prospect so well that you know their narrative as well as they do. We were talking about storytelling as the programming that runs in the operating system. If I know my ideal prospect's programming, when I tell the story of my product and say, my product helps you because blah, 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 they go, oh my gosh, wait a second. I've never heard anybody say it quite so succinctly. That's like music to my ears, because my story gets inserted directly into their narrative because I know their narrative. But if I don't know their narrative, I'm just shooting missiles over their head, hoping something is going to stick, right? But it requires us to do the work. And this is kind of a cute little thing, right? Not my drawing, but the idea. But it doesn't happen you can't just push a button and get that. You've got to do the work.
And that was kind of my point, is that this is not just, it's not just like, ask these 3 questions, and then at the end add up the numbers of the response, or like however the summary, it's not a connect the dots and you finish and all of a sudden you have the storyline and your customer, and then that's, and I don't mean to oversimplify it, but that is a lot of how marketing plans and sales funnels work. You go from A to B, and it doesn't mean that they're not good. It's just, I think that now at this point, maybe I'm already old. I don't know. Maybe I'm already old and, just gone through it. Like, I'm so tired of that. I'm so tired when I click on, I'm so apprehensive when I click on, links and things like this, that like when I click on it, I'm just like, I'm just cringing at what I'm going to experience on the other side, because I've just seen so many things that they fall flat immediately, because they're giving me what they think that I want to see instead of actually seeing what I want.
Boom. That's it. When 20 years ago, you could go to a website and it was like banner ads were popping up, pop-ups were coming at you. And we thought that was normal because that's the way it worked.
Yeah.
Right. And eventually we got rid of that. But now we have people in sales funnels where if I move my mouse from the center of the screen to the top of the screen, wait a second, don't leave. I really wasn't leaving. I was just going up here. But we're trying. We've gotten more elegant, but if you have great content, I'm going to stay. If you provide a super experience because you know me, and here's an example, Jonathan. When I first became aware of you, it was on some platform, I think even before Blab, and you were talking about Pinterest. I was like, wow, this dude really knows Pinterest, and I have a Pinterest page. I like Pinterest because as a brand strategy guy, there was a time in my career where I would put a tie on and a jacket, and that would be my uniform. That would be my work persona. And then when I took the jacket and the tie off, I had my Art Jones persona, the other guy. It was the work-life balance, right? I had to have balance between what I did at work and what I did in my own personal time. Pinterest becomes a place where you don't separate the two. You are who you are, right? If you're being honest, you're on your Pinterest page, this is who I am. And if as long as you're not jumping off the roof, with the flower drink into the pool, right? Which is maybe not what we want to see, because it says something about recklessness, right? But we really want to know who you are, and in doing that, building a Pinterest page, you're being honest with the world and saying, at work, at play, when you come to see Jonathan Tripp, this is what you're going to get. My camera just went wonkers. Oh, how about that? Great. I tapped it and it came back. So Jonathan, it's really, the point I was making is that Pinterest is a microcosm of what I really talk about. The person that curates the page to say, I'm Art Jones, and here's all the stuff on my page. Isn't that cool? There's Jaguars, there's private jets. I don't fly in private jets. I don't drive a Jaguar. But if I can curate it to make people believe that's who I am, that's being inauthentic. But when you meet me and you see my page, you say, wow, I see what this guy likes. I think that's the same guy.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Jenny's question from earlier. What if people don't agree with you? I like blue. I have a Pinterest page that just has blue, all the things blue. And if you like red and you don't like blue, I'm sorry. Maybe we don't have a basis for doing business. There's 7 billion people on the planet, and I don't need to do business with everybody. As a matter of fact, I like dogs. If you have a cat, we can do business. But if you don't like dogs, it's okay.
Yeah.
And we have to, and that goes back to this notion that know the profile of who you want to do business with and the persona of who you want to do business with. And when you have that figured out, you'll know that when I talk to Jonathan, I say, Jonathan, I'm thinking you're not my ideal prospect, right? Because we've talked. But I still want to talk to you because I want to tell you who my ideal prospect is, and I want to know who yours is, so we can maybe refer business to each other. And if you know this, then you can say, well, my ideal prospect's a woman of this age, and she does these things, and she makes this kind of money, and she has these kind of challenges. And a few weeks later, when you're backing out of your driveway and your neighbor comes out, and you say, weren't you struggling with this thing? I met this guy, kind of a neat guy, and he says he fixes what you have is broken. But you have to know how to talk about your ideal prospect.
Right. And you have to know you have to know who your community is. And so I'll share with a little bit of my experience as, doing the show. We have a Facebook group and things like that. I'm kind of looking at a lot of these experiences with people. And I mean this, I'm trying to be very general in it because there's a lot of different people. There's a lot of different people that I talk with, that I meet throughout the week and things like that. And what I find is that a lot of people, they do have these pain points. They do have those struggles, and it's really just a matter of knowing, I know that I can't fix that problem. That is not something I have an expertise in. And it took me a little bit to be, John, it's okay. But I love this. This is the follow-up part that I had to come to terms with. But I know somebody that does. And that to me is about incorporating the community into, I don't do that one thing, but I know this person does. She does this, or he does that, or this team can accomplish this goal with you.
And that's thought leadership. I mean, you know stuff. And it makes me think of Malcolm Gladwell. Took big, complex ideas and wrote books that simplified the ideas so we could grasp them or think about them in a different way. And one of his early books was Blink. And in that book, there's a great chapter where he talks about Paul Revere. Paul Revere was a silversmith, but Paul Revere is very much like Jonathan Tripp, right? Paul Revere in the community, he knew that when somebody came into his smithing shop, his silversmithing shop, he said, Paul, thanks to candelabra, my wife's going to be so happy. This is great. Now I've got to go find somebody to shoe my horse. Do you know anybody, Paul? And Paul says, funny you should ask that question. Joe, down at the end of Harry Street is the best furrier in town. Go see him. And the guy goes and sees him and says, you know what? That Paul knows stuff. And the weight of the model of Paul Revere, not trying to hold everybody close, not saying, I don't know, just go, thanks for the silversmithing business. He was a nexus of information. If he couldn't do it, he found and knew the person that could do it. So when the British were coming, the story goes that Paul went on the northern route and somebody else went on the southern route. And Paul would knock on the door at dinner time, as it turns out, and say, the British are coming to arms. And the family would say, but Paul, we're having dinner. Come in, join us. And they said, no, really, the British are coming. And because it was Paul, and Paul knew stuff, on the northern route, everybody got to arms. They left their dinner steaming on the table, and they beat back the British. On the southern route, another pillar of the community went out on a ride and knocked on doors and said, the British are coming. And people said, but it's dinner time. And he said, well, the British are coming. He said, well, we'll finish our meal, and when we're done, we'll go to arms. The other guy was a great guy, but he had not established himself as a thought leader that knew stuff. He hadn't done the work in the community. He had done the work to be asked to go ride, but he had not done the work. He wasn't a leader the way Paul Revere was a leader. And going back to your earlier question, what do we have to do? There's know your brand, tell the compelling stories, know how to market and push all the buttons, and know how to sell. But please lead and be a thought leader and stand up for what you believe. And that will change the trajectory, because everybody on the northern route of the Paul Revere ride, we know the historical story, but we don't know about the guy on the southern ride because the people got their butts kicked because they did not respond to his call. He was just a nice guy.
Wow. I love that story. I've heard that story many times, but I love the way that you told it. It's not, like I said, it's not just a set of facts that you just kind of laid out. Like I said, I've read this story many times, but it was the story, it was the way you told the story. It's compelling, it's thought-provoking, and it helps me to understand maybe some of the nuances or to key in on a specific point within that story that I can glean more, a better experience and more information from that'll help me be better at what I do. In art, I use that as an example of when we're talking to our audience members, our clients, in those people around us, whether it's a community as in, passive community in terms of, these are people that are not necessarily looking to, use you for business or make money from you or exchange that. But whoever you're connecting, art, I love the way you tell the story, because you're demonstrating this art that it's not just the place where we're going to end up. It's also the journey along which we do it. And I think you have really established just that connection. It doesn't devalue or emphasize one over the other. It's an inclusion of both. And I think that's what makes a lot of my experience with you and watching you and reading and just my experience with you has just been enriched because of that. So I guess that's maybe a very long way of saying thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank
but I would love to see more people be able to develop this art of storytelling. And in that way, for you, that to me is a way that I see you stand out in the crowd, because not a lot of people do that or want to do that. They think it just takes too much time and there's no value in it in the long run.
Well, there's and I just looked up in the stream and I saw something that Coach Jenny said, and I'll read it if I can, Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
It says, we also need to make sure that our work creates an epic experience. And I'll just pause on epic experience. So we also need to make sure our work creates an epic experience for our audience and drips of our unique personality. So Jenny is saying exactly what I'm saying. So we believe what each other believe, and that's the notion that if in a world of 7 billion people, and when I stand up for my ideas, if I I have to give you some of who I am. I have to not be. I talked to somebody the other day, and it was a woman. She said, "Should I be Marie Forolio?" I can't say Marie's last name, right? But Marie has a persona where she comes out and she does a spin, and you see what she's wearing that day, and she's compelling, and she sits in leather chairs with her guests. It creates an aura of this stagecraft. It's an experience, and having great content and sharing it in the right context to the ideal prospect that you've well defined is important. But making it fun and providing an experience along the customer journey, because knowing the customer and defining them is important. Understanding their journey is important as well. And you can't understand who they are and what their journey and where you'll meet them on their journey unless you do the work to deconstruct that and understand it. And it's not like, people often treat this kind of work as, okay, I'm going to do the business plan. I did the plan, and I get all the pages together and I sit them on my credenza, never to be seen again. I did the plan. I went to the bank. I got the money. Do I need to look at it? Yeah, you should probably look at it every month, if not every week, because that's your compass. It's your self-awareness about what your intention was. And if you build a ideal prospect profile, and you define the buyer's journey, where they're at, they go to Pinterest, they go to these blogs, they go to these networking events, and then put it away. We're all dynamic. And if nothing else, the world we live in 2016 is moving so fast that there'll be another something out there that people will flock to. There'll be another way of getting information that people will use. Right. And if your ideal prospect goes there and you're not paying attention, shame on you. You stop doing the work.
You've lost them along the way.
Yeah.
In because there is so much, I don't want to say noise. That's not quite what I mean, but there is so many things that are attention getting that if you lose them, you really have lost them until you do something else to step in front of their eyes and catch them. And this is where you really bring in the aspect of like, what are the foundational steps? It is knowing who your customer is. It's knowing their experience and their pains and their perspectives on them. And like you were saying, that's the customer journey, bringing them and understanding their story, what their pain points are, what it brings them to knowing, oh, I need the solution for this problem. It's only, I think, after that you can implement the tools, and I emphasize the word tools in this. You implement the tools of a sales funnel. That's the critical part. It's not I create a sales funnel and let's see who falls into it, right? I mean, as soon as I said it, you just kind of went, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But that's almost the
I've been there where and the reality is that I was appalled that at competitors when I was the social media guy. That's what I was doing, right, years ago. And I believe that social media was a tool. It was a toolbox, and the strategy lived outside of the toolbox. It's kind of like, I'm going to build the Eiffel Tower. I have the tools that I'm going to use, but I don't know what tools I'm going to use until I have a plan, right? Most people use sales funnels, and they use Facebook likes, or they use whatever the new thing. They use Huza as a strategy. It is not a strategy. It is a tool. If you jump on a platform without a strategy, I mean, every platform on the planet is a tool. It's tactical. It is not strategic. The person that built this platform can tell us what they think it can help us do. But if you jump on that platform without having your own strategy and knowing who you're in service to and all about yourself and blah, 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 you're missing a huge opportunity. So, social platforms are not a strategy.
No, they're not. They're a tool.
And sales funnels are not a strategy.
Right.
They're tools.
I'm really concerned for
So Jonathan, here's what do you think of this? And this is where I came to after going through this evolution.
Okay.
and I wish I could attribute this to who I first heard it from, and I haven't heard it again. And it's less tech, just be human. I mean, when you think about that, if you just get all the tech off your desk and sit down and say, what people and what businesses and who is this all about?
Right.
Who do I really work for? Who am I in service to, and who are they? And what do they need? And where are they now? And if they're there, I should go there and get it to them, right? But if I start over here and just forget about the tech for a minute and think about your humanness and being in service to somebody else in a business or in their individual life that you're going to bring value to. And when you can clear the slate and start from that beginning, you can then say, well, there's a lot of tools. There's 15,000 tools out there. Which ones are my ideal prospect using? They're using those too. Oh, maybe I should use those too if I want to reach them. Simplify everything. Right. I didn't get confused because essentially my ideal prospect said, you want me? This is where I'm at. Come meet me here.
I really agree with a lot of that with the, it's the, even in our high tech world. And I'm going to go this way. I think a lot of the high tech, the really far out right now, they're actually trying to bridge the gap. Where I think high tech used to be automation and in place of, I think high tech now is actually really focused on putting you in a real life or as close to a real life experience as we can get. Okay, and we were talking about this last night on mobile chat on Twitter. We were talking about using live stream as a way to get in touch closer with people, and we were using specifically about like news broadcasting and journalism. How can I'm not going to be on the streets around the world seeing things in place, right? The tool is to help me be in the experience a little bit more, and as the tech side of it gets better, I'm going to be able to more accurately and in more real time, be able to experience being in the same room as you are, even though maybe I can't physically reach out and shake your hand. Yeah. That's kind of what we're doing right now. You're in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm in Virginia. Okay, we are not close geographically. I have done that drive. I know how long it's going to take me. I will be there next week. Okay, if I was together, I could fly in a plane. I won't be there till later on today. Yeah. But if we wanted to meet this morning and have this conversation with people now literally all over the world, I'm going to use a certain amount of tech. But the tech doesn't serve the purpose if I can't actually talk to you. If I can't actually see a little bit of the the inflections on your face and hear the rise and the fall of your voice, and actually that I can't see your drawing that you put up. These tech things help me put me in real touch with you. And this is where I think as the tech gets better, we'll feel more connected. I think the last 5 years we've kind of gone where the tech has actually, it feels like a barrier. I think now the new tech, the good tech, and you'll know when you feel it, it breaks down that barrier, and I actually feel closer to people.
I think you're right. And I think what's happened with live streaming is that the technology has actually fallen away. Right? When before Facebook live stream, there was still a bit of a barrier. Now Facebook Live brings you into at least one-way connection with your audience.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. And we've kind of talked a little some of those internal to external strategies. I want to make sure did we miss an aspect of the art of standing out as you're seeing it and as you would express it and clearly define it?
No, it's we've talked about everything, and this is it. This is the art of standing out as brand, storytelling, marketing, and sales. And you can see under brand, it's finding your truth, and my ideal prospect cares about finding their truth. And with the stories that you tell, you engender trust. And if you engender trust and you use the tools to market, you can build a tribe. And then that great content that you share helps you sell more, and that's where you get testimonials from. And that's what the art of standing out is. This I made this last year sometime, and as I continue to evolve, story can be at the top, because absent knowing your own story, right, and knowing your ideal prospect story, the other stuff doesn't work so well. It works. I mean, it works, right? Because I know it works. 5, 6 years ago, that's the way I was working. I've evolved to incorporate the various components into the platform because they work best for me that way.
I gotta say, I love that. I was trying to, as I was kind of reading down, the card that you had put up. I think it's such a great, that's such a great graphic. It really, I loved how it kind of juxtaposes, but it carries me right along because I'm familiar with that, that thought process, right? But it was the little one-word narratives underneath that really just, it connected it with something that felt very sterile or very processed. Okay, checklist, I got that done, to something going, you know what, this is more conversational. This is how I work, because this is how I think. And I don't think a lot of people get that with that. So thank you for that. Well, Art, we're kind of coming up here. Well, we are at the hour here, and I had wanted to make sure that everybody, that you guys have all asked your questions and things like this, and I really appreciate everybody's comment as you guys have watched. You guys have watched this, whether you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you guys are watching this. I got to say thank you to everybody that has been here, that's participated. And for those of you guys, if you are a part of this community, or if you're just this the first time, I would encourage you, please support this show through Patreon. It's one of my favorite places. It's a really great place. I'm actually working on it right now. I'm coming up with a couple new, both the goals as well as some of the rewards and the benefits of being a community member. And the easy way to get there is just patreon.jonathantripp.com. It's a very easy place, and this is going to be one of those one of the areas that we're going to build community. But if you are not able to, if you're not able to support us, that's okay too, because the other part of this is that we do have a Facebook group, and I want to help everybody be able to connect further. And Facebook is a little bit more social. And again, guys, it's just a tool, just like we were talking about. It's just a tool to be able to get you in contact and connect with more people. And you can find us over on Facebook. The easiest way to get there is, well, you saw it, group.jonathantripp.com, and that will be able to get you over there. So, guys, with that, I think I'm going to close the show out. Art, thank you for being our guest.
Thank you.
And we're going to do is we're going to have just a little bit of after the show here, but we're going to stop broadcasting all over the place. But for those of you guys that are watching us live on Huza, or if you're in the Patreon group, you guys will be able to ask Art just a couple more questions and just get to know him a little bit more. So with that, guys, thank you so much. I cannot wait to see you guys for our show tomorrow.